to the Fearless Females Voice podcast. On this episode, I am joined by Nicola Coles, who has been working in the education sector as a teacher and head of sixth form. Nicola started her career on a different path in architecture and quickly realised that that wasn't where her passion lied. So she explored other options and found teaching. She joined the Teach First graduate programme and has been teaching ever since. She has had some great experiences working in UK schools as well as working abroad in Singapore. On this episode, we discuss the education system, the different routes for success for children, finding your passion, working abroad, what drives Nicola, challenges with being a female ethnic minority in a leadership position, and her future goals. This is a great episode as Nicola talks so passionately about her work. I hope you enjoy the listen. Without further ado, let's get stuck in. So what does being a fearless female mean to you?
I think actually being a fearless female to me is actually recognising it's okay to be afraid, and it's what you do with that fear that matters. So for me, when you're afraid, it shows that you're operating just outside your comfort zone, and I think that's a great thing, because in that area, that's where you're learning, that's where you're growing, and that's where you're moving towards not just the best version of yourself, but how you can kind of positively influence the world. So for me, being fearless is going, it's okay to be afraid, because that shows that you are pushing yourself, and it shows that you're trying to make a difference. I think I've got quite a strong kind of moral purpose, which is that I'm here to make a change and to make the world more equitable and more equal. And if I just exist in this kind of fear-free bubble, then how am I challenging the structures that exist and trying to make a change there? So being fearless is about recognizing it's okay to be afraid and leaning into that fear in those difficult conversations. I'm doing a course at the moment. It's quite good. It's a BAME senior leadership training course.
Well, what's BAME?
The lady, BAME was down for Black and Minority Ethnic. Okay. So it's basically, and there's a lot of debate around the correct terminology for these things, because in calling ourselves the minority, actually that's only from a white-centered perspective, right? Actually, if you take, because what it basically means is you're not white. And if you consider that on a global perspective, then the people that we are referring to as minority ethnics actually make up the global majority. But for all intents and purposes, it's people from a non-dominant culture, which in the UK means not white. So I'm on this leadership program, and the woman always goes, her little phrase is, so what, now what? So I guess what I'm saying is, when it relates to fear, like, okay, so what, you're afraid? Now what are you going to do about it? And recognizing that actually leaning into it and deciding to do things anyway, with the knowledge that just on the other side of that fear is a better you and a better world. That's what being fearless is to me.
I love that. That's so powerful. The so what, now what? There's so many things that come our way, and we're probably processing everything to think, okay, this is just hit us, but now what? What's next? What are you going to do about this? I love that approach. That's really powerful.
Exactly. Yeah, there's another phrase. I've got a lot of these little phrases from different leaders that I've worked with. A guy I worked with in Singapore, he always said, don't just do something, stand there. And, as opposed to, don't just stand there, do something. And actually, as a leader, and when we are when we are trying to refine our craft and be reflective individuals, part of that is going, okay, cool, I feel afraid. So I'm just going to sit with that feeling for a while, think about why that might be, think about what my actions, what my next steps are. I guess it's that fight or flight mode, right? But what I guess I'm suggesting is that we just sometimes have to slow down and go, okay, cool, I feel this. What am I going to do about it? And bring a level of intentionality to either overcoming that or, working it out with talking about it with someone else or whatever.
I know for me, I go into some kind of logical thinking. I think it's just from my engineering background. And when these things come my way, I do almost like a little mini risk assessment, a dynamic risk assessment to see, right, okay, well, what could happen? What could this be? And then I'm just thinking, this is far too logical. Shall I follow my gut? Shall I follow my heart? Like, what do I do? So there's all these things that come my way, or what I'm processing when I'm in that kind of that risk zone or going out of my comfort zone.
Yeah, it's funny because my background is I'm also a mathematician. I'm a maths teacher. So I think another little phrase that helps me in those moments is is put the data on the table. Like, what does the data say? Is this fear founded in, like you said, is it founded in logic? What the numbers say? Am I right to be afraid of this thing? Like a fear of flying, but the data is just this. The chances of you dying in a plane crash are very, very slim. The chances of me dying from this difficult conversation that I've got to have with this person at work are very, very slim. So just get over it, Nicola, and just do it, because you'll be thankful for yourself afterwards.
I love that. So you mentioned that you're a maths teacher. So maybe we could dive into a bit on that. How did you get into education and being a teacher?
Yeah. Well, I didn't start in education. My undergraduate degree is in architecture. In my A levels, I did maths, physics, and art and design. And I really feel like one day someone just said, "There's a really good combination for architects. You've got your maths, you've got your arts. Be an architect." I was like, okay, cool, fine. I just loved everything. I know I've listened to you speak about how much you enjoyed all your different subjects at school. That was very much, that was me. And architecture was a wicked degree, very, very diverse, very, we did a little bit of what they call like phenomenology of buildings. How does space make us feel? We did history of architecture, the construction, and being in the studio doing the creative design and so on. Really enjoyed it. And then realized that I enjoyed the process, but I didn't really care about buildings. I was never like, oh, this is my favorite architect. And people would say, oh, what's your favorite building in London? I go, I don't know.
People ask that. Is that a question for architects? I've never been asked that question.
No, I guess not. Maybe not in London, but people expect you to have an interest in the subject that you're studying, right? And I just really didn't. I didn't have a passion for that. I worked after I did my degree. I worked in China for a year, because in architecture you do 3-year undergrad, 1 year in practice. So I worked in an architecture firm in a city called Tianjin in northern China, and just realized like I was working all hours of the day and night to meet the kind of demands of other people. I just was like, why am I doing this? Who is this serving? I remember very clearly when I was working in China, it was with an urban planning company, and they used to get projects that were like hectares and hectares of land, and you would draw one line on a map, and that would represent like, I don't know, 100-mile motorway or something stupid like this. And I've got a clear memory of going out to a rice field and standing there, and they were like, right, this is where this road is going to go. And I was like, oh, there's like consequences to this. I hadn't really thought about, like, there's consequences to real people's lives that we're just like, la, 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 I'm going to draw a line and put this road here. And actually I was like, yeah, I don't feel comfortable with that. And I guess in the back of my mind, I had always enjoyed school. Both of my parents are or were educators. My dad was a maths teacher. My mum taught home economics at kind of like food and nutrition. And I heard of a program called Teach First. For people that aren't familiar with Teach First, it's a graduate training program that recognises that there's a massive disparity in terms of educational achievement. And it's really driven by your parental income. So whether you do well at school or not is determined by your parental income. And
well, there's a link there?
Yeah, I think it's something like, I can't remember the exact statistics, but something like 90, it's definitely in the 90s, 95+% of people who kind of go to private schools, let's say, which is a way of indicating parental wealth, will go on to university. And it's almost flip reversed. Again, I can't remember the exact percentage, but I want to say less than 10% of people of children who are on free school meals, which is another indicator of parental wealth, will go on to university and further education. So Teach First was established to take graduates that kind of have a 2-1 or higher and put them in challenging schools where, there's kind of socio-economic deprivation to a certain extent, and to try and raise aspirations and outcomes in those areas. So once I'd come to terms with the fact I wasn't going to be an architect, I said, actually, this is what I want to do. I want to be an educator, and I started on the Teach First program.
How did you know? Because you said you weren't passionate about architecture, which is fair enough, but how did you then know that your passion would be educating?
I don't think I did. And I think I encourage teachers to think about this a lot. Sometimes I wonder, am I just in education because it was all I knew? what I like about education is everyone's been through it. Everyone can relate to it.
Yeah.
So I wonder sometimes, did I just default back to that because I enjoyed school? And probably yes, I enjoyed it. It was I knew what that teacher life might look like because of my own experience and my own family. And it wasn't through working until I worked in it more that I think that passion for addressing educational inequality developed. It was part of my journey which put that into kind of very clear focus, was moving from a state school in UK to a fee-paying school in Singapore, and acknowledging, having walked on both sides of those divides, was going, oh, this is, there's an inequality here that doesn't sit well with me, and I want to spend some more time and invest more energy in trying to address. And even when I work with young people now, a lot of them say, oh, I don't know what my passion is. I don't know what my purpose is. And sometimes it's not until we go down a certain road that we realize, oh no, this is it, or actually maybe it's not here. But yeah, I don't think I knew starting out on that journey that it would be where I would be kind of 10 years down the line.
And it's interesting you say you talk to the younger generations about finding their passion. What I found more and more as I'm getting older is that this is so applicable to the older generation as well. I'm there like, what is my passion? Trying to figure out, is this the right steps, or have I taken the right path? And do I want to do something different? I think finding your passion is an evolving thought. So you can always change direction. That there's no harm in that. And yeah, I think it's just a continuous process that you kind of work through on yourself to be like, is this, once you've accomplished something, or once you've got so far in something, you may realize then actually I'm ready now for a new challenge, or I'm ready to find something different or do something different. It's almost kind of a discovery process, let's say.
Absolutely. And I love that you talk about this idea of a passion evolving. It's a problem that I face with my young people in the job that I do now. So I'm currently work as head of sixth form. So I do a lot of kind of careers advice and university and next steps. And they have quite a fixed approach to, if I do X degree at university, I'm going to be X, and that's it for the rest of my life,
I've been there.
Yeah. And they think it's very much, this is my vocation. They put so much pressure on themselves at the age of 18 to say, oh, I'm doing this degree and this is it. And I obviously kind of try and find ways to encourage them to think differently about that. But I understand where it comes from, probably from previous generations. And but now we're seeing more people having sort of like portfolio careers where they do a little bit of this for a while, they have side projects, do a bit of that. But this generation is just coming to terms with actually that their life and trajectory might look quite different from their parents or grandparents, especially the case with immigrant families. I work with a lot of immigrant families. But what I encourage people to do is to not just think about what their passions are and where their passions lie, but to consider what makes them angry as well. Like, what is it about this world, not just that you enjoy, but that you really dislike? Because I have this hypothesis that our passions change, like you said, like our passions are always evolving, right? But if you have a strong sense of, oh, there's this thing in the world that just frustrates me, be that racism or sexism or whatever, identify whatever your niche is. And I think, and I'm interested in the next 20 years to see if this is the case for me, but I feel like those stay with you longer than your passions do. So if you can identify attract a life trajectory that's going to put you to fighting those whatever things that make you angry or injustices, that you're more likely to feel fulfilled than if you follow a passion that's maybe going to change. It's a theory. Agree. I don't know.
No, I think it's a good theory. I do feel that being fulfilled in what you're doing is almost driven by not just your passion, but as you said, something you're really interested in. So it could be something that you're seeing is not quite right in the world that you want to make a direct impact on. And that's fulfilling because you're actually changing something. You're actually, whether that's someone's life, whether that's a process, it could be anything big or small, but you're actually making an impact and doing something and achieving that. So that's almost that self-fulfillment. And
that's right.
Yeah. And what we were talking about with you mentioned passions and careers, and when you go into do a degree, so for example, I did chemical engineering. I knew that I would be a chemical engineer or an engineer. I didn't think, oh, I'll be doing something else. And this is something that also people of our generation, and even maybe younger generations, think of, okay, well, I did this degree, I'm now in this role, and that is my identity. So I, for example, am an engineer. So if I want to step into doing, let's say, marketing or sales or something else, it's almost like, oh, I'm changing my identity to do something else. And that's almost like maybe it's seen as a negative because you've studied this to go into that. So how do you kind of portray that to kids in school these days, thinking that when they do a certain degree, that is their job for life, as you said?
Yeah, I mean, that's really difficult. I think part of it is about establishing, it's about recognizing that the school needs to engage with the community outside of its four walls. So we always try where possible to invite, get different stakeholders in the community to come in and share their stories. That could look like inviting university students or recent graduates to talk about, a lot of graduates, they start grad training programs in fields that don't relate directly to their degree. So getting those people to come in and share their stories, I think, can be really powerful. And I think the other thing is, in schools, we can do more to just to share the stories of the people that are already in the building. I'll give you an example of how I've tried to do that recently. In my sixth form team, nobody did an undergraduate degree in education. Everybody's come from a different field and then ended up being a teacher or working as a member of the support staff. And so I've started a podcast with the kids called In Conversation With, where each week, it's very student driven. Each week, one of the students interviews a member of staff. It could be a teacher, it could be support staff, it could be a lunchtime supervisor, and they just share their story and how they got to where they are today. And I think through hearing more about people's lived experiences, students realize, oh, it's not as simple as there's a straight road from A to B. And actually, these people are very fulfilled, even though they're not doing what they kind of set out to do when they were 18 years old. So I think people get that idea that if I do engineering, I'm going to be an engineer, because they haven't necessarily connected with people that have started something and then ended up somewhere else. I think trying to connect students with people who can share their lived experiences is really powerful.
I agree. I think networking is so important, and actually seeing that it's been someone else has been there and done that, and anything is possible.
Definitely. And I think, again, I'm just mindful of the fact that I work in a school that's predominantly, currently at the moment, working in a school that's at 90, it's quite homogenous, it's 90+% Bengali. And I think we really need to think about representation as well, because a lot of universities will have outreach programs, or widening participation type programs, but they won't necessarily have people from the same cultural background as my learners. So I'm just very aware when I'm picking these voices and like you said, trying to tap into networks, that I'm looking for people who my learners can see themselves in. Because it's one thing it's one thing for me as a fairly privileged, light-skinned woman to come and tell this Bengali family, this is what success looks like, and you should go to university and don't worry about being a doctor. But actually, if they can hear that from people whom they see themselves in, I think that's way more powerful. So what I'm trying to explore at the moment is, how do we who is best placed to give that, not even advice, but who is best placed to facilitate those conversations? And if it's not me, how can I use my privilege as a leader within that organization to get the right people in?
Yeah, because even coming out of school, there's so many different routes that children can take. Now, back in the day, I won't say how long ago that was, but when I was in school, the only path that was really set for me was, or drilled into me when I was in college, let's say, was university. So I didn't know what other options there were. So all I knew was, okay, you do your GCSEs, you do your A levels, and then you go into university. And some people take a gap year. But then, those people, like, really, what are they really doing? And, there's a lot of negativity around that as well. But now, as I've grown up, there's more and more options available. And I think, wow, I actually wish I could have done some of those at that stage. And some of them being, as I said, a gap year. Now, I've seen that gap years are so important for a person. There's so much learning that you can do about yourself in that whole year. And you can take that year however you want. Obviously, a lot of people go traveling, which I think, because, I love travel, is the best thing to do. But even if it's just earning money, getting a feel for what kind of jobs you like and don't like, where your strengths lie, what you're weak at, what you want to develop in. And then another one is also an apprenticeship. Now, everywhere where I've worked, being in an engineering industry, there's been many apprenticeships available to people coming out of college, and the amount of things that they learn and they're educated on, and they start earning money straight away, I think is such a nice way of someone coming out and being able to explore and still be in education, but be more creative and hands-on in a field. So there are other options outside of university. How is that now being portrayed in school to the children, to say these are all the options, or is it still quite university is the right way to go?
Yeah, I think, it's something I wrestle with often. A lot of it is down to the organisation. There will be some schools, I've been into schools where they literally have written in the entranceway, climbing the ladder to university.
Oh,
and
wow.
That's very much like, that's their mission. And particularly in these kind of teach first type schools where it's like, we're going to tackle this inequality gap, and the surest way to success is through university. So let's get all the kids there. And then it becomes a bit of a, school, our job is to equip you for university. University's job is to equip you for real life and the rest of the world. So yeah, something that I'm very aware of. I wonder if when we were at school, is it that those opportunities didn't exist, or was it that they weren't kind of promoted, or we weren't made aware of them? I think it's probably a bit of both. I think the number of apprenticeships have definitely increased. I think schools are recognising actually it's not just a one model kind of fits all for everybody. It's tricky when you are working in an environment where you have kind of limited resources. Often you have to take a kind of utilitarian approach to these things, right? And if you look at, again, it's about how you define success. But if you look at success as being like, I have enough money to live a comfortable lifestyle and to provide for my family or whatever, in terms of the numbers, university still provides. Actually, I'm going to stop myself there. It's not just university, it's about having a degree. So having a degree opens a lot of doors. Now, what you've just touched on is really important, is that actually now there are a lot of degree apprenticeships. So you can get a degree without going to university, or you kind of couple it. So a model like that might look like you're in uni 4 days a week and then working at a job on the 5th day, or you do, kind of 3 months university and then a month working on a kind of placement. That's a very attractive option to a lot of people, because for those, you don't have to pay student, you don't have to pay student fees? Tuition fees. Yeah, you don't have to pay tuition fees, and you get paid. So that's massive. When I worked in Singapore, one of my roles was a gap year and internship coordinator. And I think what's true of both that role and of me trying to encourage students to consider apprenticeships as an option is, sometimes when you're talking with students, you feel like you're preaching to the choir. The students are like, yeah, cool, sign me up, I want to do an apprenticeship, or yeah, gap year sounds really interesting. Actually, the stakeholder we need to engage to bring about change in this area are the parents.
Agree. I was just going to go on to this point as well, because there's that perception from the parents to be like, oh, my child's had got a degree, and oh, my child's going to be a doctor and study medicine and this and that. But actually, it's the parents who may need a bit more education in that field as well.
Yeah, and that's super tricky. And I know I keep coming back to this idea of working with migrants, but if you're working with kind of second, third generation immigrant family, my question is, are you making that decision for your child kind of out of fear before? Because you did have to, you came to this country and you didn't have all the resources available to you, and so you had to think, what is the best way for me to make money for my child? And actually success looks like being a doctor, being a lawyer, being an engineer. And now that I think more families are, not everybody, but more families are financially secure 2 or 3 generations down, what does success look like for my child? Or now it's about giving them the kind of freedom of choice to explore what it is exactly that they want to do. But it's very difficult, very difficult. Something that I'm trying to do more of now is not just engaging with parents, but making a more conscious attempt to engage with siblings. What I found in my current role is that there is often a language barrier between myself and the parents. And again, we talked about this before, like, am I the best person to be giving this advice to your family? But actually siblings who might have been through the university system themselves or were born in the UK can kind of act as a link between the school and the parents. So yeah, I'm trying to do more what I call like sibling support sessions, to really engage them in the conversations as well. But yeah, it's slow progress.
So you mentioned that you worked in Singapore. So what made you go abroad and work in a school which is based there?
Yeah, actually, I think this ties in with your point on gap years. What I realised when I was at I didn't realise at the time, but afterwards, in my first year of university, I lived in halls. Second year of university, I lived in a house of 6 people. And I realised everyone in that house was a year older than me. The other 5 had all taken a gap year. So there was something that attracted me to those people. And I think it was the fact that they were kind of very worldly aware. You know, they had a great sense of self. They were kind of culturally sensitive and like engaged. And so when I finished, as I mentioned before, when I finished at university, I decided to go off to work in China. And the reason I picked China was because it was the culture that I thought was most different from what I knew and understood. So I'm British, I'm European, I kind of get that. Obviously, other Western cultures are kind of similar. My family's from the Caribbean, get that. But China and Chinese, I was like, oh, this is going to be completely new. Yeah, so I think that kind of set off the travel bug in me. Liked China, did find it quite difficult to really engage with the locals partly because of the language barrier. I did try and learn Mandarin. It's very, very difficult.
How far did you get with that? That's impressive, because I know how difficult Mandarin is to learn.
Mandarin's super hard. Yeah, no, I started whilst I was out there, had a teacher whilst I was out there, came back, continued to go to night school for Mandarin. And actually, when I moved to Singapore, I had this idea in my mind that I was going to develop my Mandarin. Singapore's a super interesting society. There's 4 official languages. Gosh, you challenge me now, see if I can remember them.
I was going to say, which ones are they?
Yeah, Mandarin, English, Tamil, and Malay.
Yeah, okay.
But everyone, all business is kind of undertaken in English. So I didn't develop it any further because I just spoke in English all the time. Anyway, I digress. The point is, after I'd been to China, I was like, I like this culture, but I am finding it hard to feel at home here. Singapore is often referred to as easy Asia because you do have that you still have that, Eastern culture and values. However, it's in English, there's Marks and Spencers, it feels homely and familiar. So a job opportunity came up in Singapore. The key driver for me was really the mission statement of the school. They said, the school was called UWC, the United World College, and their mission statement was to use education as a force to unite people, nations, and cultures for peace and a sustainable future.
That's a strong mission.
I was like, whoa. Wow. And what was great is it wasn't just something that they paid lip service to. It really was at the heart of every kind of decision that they made. I think I'd worked in the UK schools for 2 years by this point. I felt a little disillusioned with it's never the children that are the problem. There's a lot of cynicism amongst staff. Staff in UK schools don't have it easy. So I understand where this negativity comes from, but I found that quite draining. In
what sense? Can you talk to us a bit more around that? The stuff in the UK?
Yeah, I mean, schools in the UK are under a lot of pressure. This is a lot to do. There's pressure. When we were at school, it was the number of A stars to C's that you get in your class. Now it's this progress 8 school. Leaders are constantly, trying to serve the best needs of all stakeholders. And sometimes in centering their students, they might forget about or lessen their awareness of the impact those decisions are having on staff. And I think it became a lot of, just kind of talking behind each other's back or moaning about this person, and staff room chat wasn't pleasant. But I'm just conscious to say that I completely understand when you're in a system that's high pressure, and it's an act. It's a service job, really, being a teacher. You're serving the students, and sometimes you're not placed at the forefront of that. But yeah, I think I felt that draining my energy slightly. So found this school, was completely naive in my application. just was like, oh, this sounds nice, I'm going to apply. I remember very clearly, it was the only international job that I applied for. I remember the first day there in the maths department, and the head of department asked us all to introduce ourselves. The guy on the right of me has been working in education for 16 years and has all these qualifications, and the guy on the left of me is literally the author of the IB, which is like the A-level textbook on maths.
Wow.
And I'm just sat there going, why am I here? Why did they pick me? So professionally I was looking for something different. The vision really kind of stuck with me. I knew I'd liked living in Asia and there before. And I think personally as well, a big push was at that point, I'd just come out of a fairly long-term relationship, was thinking, I've got a choice here. I can just carry on doing what I'm doing, or I can just shake things up a bit and
be
make
fearless.
A big change. And
there
so
you
that's
go.
what I decided to do. That's it. Lean in.
It's a big
that's
change, yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't know anybody in Singapore. Never been there before. Didn't know anybody there at all. And there I was 4 years down the line, having the time of my life.
Nice. How did you find the education system differ from the UK to Singapore?
It's tricky. I'm mindful of the fact that I didn't work in a Singapore state school, so I can't. It's tricky to compare like for like, right? So I worked here. I worked in a state school. Singapore was predominantly fee paying, although there were scholarships available for students. And I think the school, I feel like it had a greater level of autonomy. For example, they didn't have to do GCSEs. They didn't have to. They didn't have Ofsted, although they do have boards that kind of check regulatory boards, but there wasn't this level of intensity in terms of we're going to micromanage our teachers and come in and do observations all the time. And it's, in the UK, I remember very clearly, you get given a judgment, outstanding, good, requires improvement, or inadequate on your teaching. In Singapore, it was an open door policy. We recognized that everyone is learning constantly, and it was a non-judgmental come in. I'd appreciate your feedback. You can ask for them to look at a particular area of your practice or just generally on your classroom approach. So it felt very much that we were all working towards this clear mission that I've referred to before. Whereas in the UK school, I felt like that statement wasn't so unifying. And therefore, there was, it was more difficult out here. I think the other difference in Singapore is that there was a large focus on something called service learning, which is something we don't have in the UK at all.
What is service learning?
Service learning is, I guess, almost like community service, I guess. But it's not just like, I'm going to go and volunteer with this organization. There's a level of intentionality. They deliver it as if it were a subject. So it's timetabled in. Every member of staff out there has to lead a service project. We talk about service as being 4 different kind of, I think there's 4. It could be like advocacy work. It could be direct service, going out and doing the volunteering, indirect service, so raising awareness, campaigning, this kind of thing. And what it just meant was that the students interacted regularly with people that if that program hadn't ever existed, they wouldn't have come into contact with, which I think is really, really valuable. So I spoke on the fact that it was a private school. A lot of these students a lot of the families were very wealthy. Yet, on a kind of Friday after school, we might take them down to work with the local kind of migrant construction workers, or on a Sunday, they might do English sessions with some of the Indonesian maids or helpers that were working in Singapore. I facilitated a particularly interesting project around bringing people with Down syndrome and able-bodied, for want of a better phrase, individuals together. And there was just so much learning that took place in those sessions that I think we really missed the treat on not having anything like that in the UK.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've never heard of something like that outside of voluntary work that you can do by your own kind of accord, but never from a school perspective. Do you think we're missing out in the UK education system there?
Yes. To be quite frank, yes. And again, I recognise that there are constraints that you have to work inside of when you are a state-funded school. That's not to say that people aren't trying. There's a lot of schools that do extracurricular activities, But the difference in Singapore is that it wasn't seen as extracurricular. It was very much, this is part of our education. And it felt like a more holistic education than I've seen in schools in England. And actually one of my key drivers for coming back was saying, I've seen these great things, and having worked in the UK, I know that they're missing in those societies. So can I try and bridge that gap? Can I try and bring some of those good ideas that I've seen in Singapore back to schools in the UK?
Absolutely. That's what it's all about. Get some learnings, bring them back, see what works, see what doesn't. So
exactly.
Oh, that's good. So your time in Singapore, were you a head of sixth form there as well? Or is that when you got back to here? Got back to the UK?
That wasn't until I came back. So I went out to Singapore as a maths teacher. Another difference between the two systems is the pay. Unfortunately, I think in the UK, if you want to make any money in teaching, you unfortunately you have to leave the classroom. We don't pay our teachers well enough for them to just stay as a classroom teacher forever. We paid a reasonable amount, but if you really want to earn a significant amount of money, you have to step out of the classroom. And in Singapore, that wasn't the case. They pay their classroom teachers very well, which meant you really had very knowledgeable practitioners that were still in the classroom. So I was there as a fairly newly qualified teacher after 2 years. But like I said, this author of the textbook, he'd been teaching 15, 20 years and was just a maths teacher, but that label I think is sometimes unhelpful. And then when I was out there, I did maths teaching. Then I got this extra responsibility of a gap year and internship role, and working with parents and communities to raise awareness of those as an alternative to university. And then it wasn't until I came back here that I actually started as head of year 13, and then recently took on the head of sixth form role.
And what's it like being a female in a leadership position in your industry or in your sector, let's say, in education?
There's definitely a disproportionate number of males in leadership. Generally in secondary schools, I don't have the exact figures, but there are more female teachers. There's definitely, that kind of flip reverse when you get to leadership, there's definitely more male heads and assistant heads. So yeah, we're still in the minority in terms of leadership positions. And I think it's important to mention the intersectionality as well, right, between gender and race. So race is a particularly interesting one. I think something like, again, as a maths teacher, I should know these things. I don't. Something like 14%, 15% of the population in the UK is what we referred to earlier as BAME, or from the global majority for a slightly better reframe. But in education, it's like, I think it's like 4% of teachers are BAME.
Okay.
And then once you get up to leadership, that number goes down even further. And then once you look at BAME female leaders, it goes down again. So it's I wouldn't say it's lonely. What I'm trying to do, and I encourage people to do more, is to look for mentors. I think coaching and mentors can be really helpful. I have found it quite difficult to connect with other female BAME leaders.
Because there aren't any, or is it just because you're struggling to find some?
Yeah, I think generally the numbers are low, as we just mentioned with the percentages.
Yeah.
And it's hard, like when you're in those positions, I don't know how much capacity you have to kind of go, I'm going to be a fantastic head teacher, and then I'm also going to be aware that I'm a Black female head teacher, therefore the burden's on me to pull up other Black women. Like, no, it shouldn't be like that. As I mentioned earlier in the programme, I am taking part in a BAME senior leadership course, which I found really helpful, thinking that education is not just your school, but being aware that you're part of a bigger context and looking outside of those four walls to connect with other educators and that might be going through the similar experiences to you, I think is helpful. And in a few years' time, I would like to offer that to other people as well, and to be able to mentor. But it's a demanding job, so we'll see how much time I've got on my hands.
So you touched upon mentorship. So can you tell us, what does a good mentor look like to you?
One of the things I learnt a lot about when I was working in Singapore was different types of communication. I'll give you an example. One type of communication is consultancy. So consultancy is, I'm asking your opinion on a matter, you're the expert, I want you to tell me what I should do in this situation. For me, that's not particularly helpful, because I think just because it's worked well for you doesn't mean it's going to work well for me too. So I'm kind of skeptical of people that say, this is definitely how you should do something. This is the right way to do it. In a mentor, I'm looking for someone who can relate to the experiences that I've been through, but also recognizes that I am best positioned to solve my own problems, and that what I need from them is to ask me exploratory questions to help me mediate my thinking on those whatever experience it is that I'm going through. So people that I find it really helpful when people paraphrase what I've said, to just make sure that they've heard what I think I've communicated. I think it's really helpful for them to help me think about what I've done in the past that was successful in a similar situation, to help me think about what resources I have access to, but all the time believing that I am best positioned to solve my own problems. So that's what I'm looking for in a coach or in a mentor. And I do think it helps if there's a shared lived experience between the two of you. But again, I don't want that person to tell me this is how you do it, because I know as a teacher and as an educator, if I tell a student do this, they're just going to be like, no.
That's not teaching, that's telling.
That's it. Exactly. Yeah.
So I can see you're really, really passionate about educating and being a teacher and making an impact as well. So tell me, what drives you?
I think I touched on it earlier, but what drives me is having walked on both sides of that social divide, right? I have seen, and ultimately, don't forget, like, the students that I was working with in Singapore are applying to the same institutions as the students that I was working with in the UK. But they're starting from very different points. So my drive is, having had the privilege to walk on both sides of that divide, I feel like there's, again, this old quote, like, those with the privilege to know have the duty to act. Like, I can't do nothing now because it's not fair. It's just simply not fair. And it's about using the privilege that I do have, which is being, there's a long list, but I'm well educated. I am middle class. I am able-bodied. I am cisgendered, whatever it is. And saying, well, how can I use those characteristics that have given me privilege in society to elevate and be an ally to other minority groups that aren't so easily kind of given a platform to, talk on these things. And I really do think, again, it's cliche, but I do think education is the most powerful weapon we can use to change the world. So that's where I decided to invest my time, was in schools. I think if we can embed some of these values and a greater awareness of students' own identity and their privileges and how they can support other people, and inequalities in society from a young age, then when they get older and they go into work, they'll still have an awareness of, oh, hold on a second, there's no Black people sat at this table. Why is that? What can I do about that? So yeah, that's what drives me, is going, well, it's just not fair.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. And what are your goals for 2021?
2021 started with me reading a book. I recommend it to you. It's very much education specific.
What's it called?
But it is called 10% Braver.
Writing it
10%
down.
Braver. And it's written by, lots of different contributors to this book, based on the hashtag on Twitter, Women's Ed. And yeah, they just share all their different experiences of what being 10% braver looks like for them in education. So one of my goals for 2021 is to be braver, is to lean into that fear. What I've found helpful since the start of the year is I've got a little book where I note down successes from the day. Like, this is an example of me being braver, like, well done. So today I will write in that book, I did a podcast, and at first I was nervous, but I did it anyway. Like, that was me being braver. Yeah. Another example, maybe there's a difficult conversation that I had to have at work and I didn't shy away from it, and I had it, and I'm still here and everything's okay. Like, write it down. so that in those moments where I do feel, oh, this is just all too much and I've got, this imposter syndrome and I just can't do it, I lack confidence, is to go, well, you've done it before and you can do it again. So 10% braver is number one. And I think along with that comes being more disciplined. I want to try and be more disciplined and more intentional in my approach. I know that you're kind of a big advocate for, kind of working out and getting into a good frame of mind. For me, when I'm busier and I'm more intentional with how I'm spending my time, I find that I'm more productive. So it's about, getting up that half an hour earlier in the morning. I started going for jogs, very short, literally like 10 minutes, but being more disciplined with my time. Okay, this is my power hour and now I'm going to watch Netflix, or this is my, I think is a good habit of mind that I'm trying to foster, but it's definitely a journey that I'm very much at the start of.
Oh, it's good. It takes time, and you got to start somewhere, right? So that's good.
Developing that, yeah. So those are my two things: bravery, discipline, and bravery.
I like that, and I'm sure you'll get far with that. You've got this. Yeah, you've been working on that anyway, so it's just almost developing it, taking that step further. So it's good.
That's right. Yeah, and I think you encourage people whenever we set these goals. It's about celebrating our successes and simultaneously acknowledging that we've still got a way to go to get to whatever this nirvana looks like. But writing them down. What did I do today that was brave? What did I do today that embodied discipline? I think has been super helpful for me. I actually had a ring made. This is so sad. I had a ring made that says discipline and bravery.
Oh, I like that. For those who can't see it, she's just showing it to me on the screen, and it's engraved in 2 silver rings. They look really nice.
Yeah. So daily reminder, because like you said, it's about creating a habit, right? So if I have that there when I'm having these conversations, I'm going, no, Nicola, stick with it. Like, say that thing that's on your mind. Lean into that, because we said at the very start, like, just on the other side of that fear is a better you and a better world, and that's what we're all here to achieve.
Exactly, that's what it's all about. And tell me then, what's next for you?
Oh, what's next? I feel fairly recently took on this head of sixth form role, so I feel like I'm definitely still growing and developing in that, and I think what I try to do, I don't have like an ultimate goal, but I always try and ask myself, how can I best utilize the skills that I've currently got to bring about change in the system that I'm currently in. So I feel like I'm still learning and can do a lot in the school that I'm currently in. So hopefully I'll be there for a little while longer. But ultimately, I do want to challenge the statistics that we spoke on earlier about the number of BAME females in leadership. I think it's about acknowledging that I started in education fairly young. I've nearly been in education now for 8-9 years. So if I'm going to be ahead within the next 10 years, that still leaves me a good 20 years, 30 years plus on my career. Like, what then? So, and again, we touched on it earlier, but I do want to become better connected and pay it forward, connect with other female BAME educators and try and coach and mentor them along the journey. And the purpose there, or the intent there, is that if we can build capacity in those people, that is going to filter down to a larger number of students, and the more students I can positively impact, the better.
And we started this podcast talking about following your passion or finding your passion. And I can really hear that you are so passionate about being an educator and also the whole BAME topic as well, and really influencing others and making an impact in other people's lives. Because as you said, it is a real small minority there that is in that kind of leadership positions, let's say, as well as within the education world. So it's really nice that you're able to make an impact, and that's what you want to do. So that is your passion. And you will definitely get there. It's just something you got to keep working on, and you'll make that change.
I'll try my best.
Well, thank you so much, Nicola, for coming on this podcast. It's been such a pleasure to have you on.
It's an absolute pleasure, Nia. Thank you. I told you before, I think what you're doing is great. I love the platform that you've created to elevate female voices, and it is. I'm learning from you, hopefully, as much as you've learned from me. So thank you.
Thank you. It's so nice to hear. Thank you so much for listening to the Fearless Females Voice podcast. Be sure to join our Facebook group called Fearless Females and stay tuned for the next episode. Bye for now.